For 400 years, it was illegal, in effect, to let this animal live in Britain, trapped to extinction, absent from every river in the country, until 2014, when a camera trap on the River Otter in Devon caught a mother and her kit swimming in the current, and University of Exeter researchers realized they were looking at a species that wasn't supposed to exist here anymore. I'm going to show you the two rivers that decided what happened next, and the number I want you to hold on to is 15 minutes. How long it used to take water to cross one particular stretch of Cornish stream before this animal changed it. If you want to know exactly how this ends, subscribe now, because the government's answer wasn't decided by opinion. It was decided by two rivers, tested two different ways, and neither one closes the story completely. For 4 centuries, there were no wild beavers anywhere in Britain, trapped out for fur, for meat, and for castoreum, a scent gland secretion once sold for perfume and medicine. Britain rebuilt every one of its rivers, floodplains, and drainage systems across those 400 years without a single beaver in the equation. Then, sometime around 2008, nobody knows exactly where or how, beavers turned up on the River Otter anyway. Maybe an escape, maybe an unauthorized release. What's certain is that England's environment agencies were suddenly looking at a wild, unlicensed population of a legally extinct species, and under the rules at the time, the default answer was removal. Catch them, relocate them to captivity, treat it as a containment problem. Then the camera trap settled the question that mattered most. The beavers weren't just surviving, they were breeding. And once an animal is confirmed breeding wild on your rivers, quietly removing it stops being simple. So the Devon Wildlife Trust proposed something else, a 5-year licensed trial. Let the beavers stay, monitored, and actually measure what they do before deciding their fate. Natural England agreed. The clock started in 2015. Here's exactly what that trial was built to test, and it's the same belief that justified 400 years of persecution before it, that a large dam-building rodent loose on a river is a liability, something that floods land and causes more problems than it solves. A University of Exeter team led by Professor Richard Brazier spent 5 years checking that belief against real data. By the end of the trial, the population had grown from 2 breeding pairs to at least 8, later estimated at up to 15 family groups, and 6 dams had gone into the water. The results were specific. During heavy rainfall, the wetlands the beavers had built were storing more than 24 million liters of water, and storm flows downstream were reduced by an average of 30%. The dams also acted as a filter rather than a barrier. Sediment and pollutants that would otherwise travel straight downstream settled out behind each structure instead, and the new wetland habitat around the ponds began supporting amphibians, wildfowl, and water voles that hadn't had that kind of ground available in generations. And in the pools the dams created, surveys found 37% more fish than in comparable stretches of river with no dams at all. In August 2020, the government confirmed the River Otter beavers could stay permanently, the first legally sanctioned reintroduction of an extinct native mammal in England's history. That should be the end of the story. It isn't, because the River Otter result has a hole in it that any good scientist would flag immediately. Nobody chose those beavers, nobody planned where they'd settle, and nobody had clean measurements of that river before they arrived. It's a strong result. It is not a controlled experiment, which means, as far as hard evidence goes, Britain had one promising but imperfect study weighed against 4 centuries of assumption. That's not nothing. It's also not proof. 250 kilometers away, in a village that had already flooded twice, somebody was about to close that gap. The village is Laddock, Cornwall. In 2012, and again in 2013, floodwater came through people's homes, fed by a stream that rises fast after heavy rain, with climate projections pointing toward more of it, not less. In 2014, the Cornwall Wildlife Trust picked a stretch of that stream, 2 kilometers upstream of the village, and did the one thing nobody had done on the River Otter. They put monitoring equipment on the water first. For 18 months before a single beaver went in, they recorded exactly how that stream behaved, how fast it rose, how quickly a storm upstream became a flood at Laddock's doorstep. Then, in 2017, they released 2 adult beavers, a male and a female, named Chewy and Willow, by public vote. Within 2 nights, they were building. This is the detail that turns Cornwall from a nice story into an answer. Whatever changed after 2017 could be measured against a known baseline on the same water, in the same place, recorded before the animals ever touched it. This wasn't a population that showed up and got studied after the fact, the way the River Otter beavers were. This was the controlled version of the same test, run the way it should have been run the first time. Remember that number I asked you to hold. Before Chewy and Willow, water crossed that site in about 15 minutes. By 2022, the pair and their offspring had built 8 dams. The stream had split into 4 separate channels across the valley floor instead of running as one. Surface water storage had increased by roughly 1,500 cubic meters. The pools behind the new dams ran deeper and slower than the original stream ever had, and they started holding larger trout than the site had previously supported. 10 bird species not previously recorded there turned up in survey after survey, including the willow tit, a species in national decline, alongside new sightings of water rail and green sandpiper. Dragonflies and bats followed the same pattern, showing up in numbers the site hadn't produced before the dams went in, and the number the researchers actually came back for. The height the stream rose to after heavy rainfall was now up to 33% lower than the 18 months of baseline data collected before the beavers arrived, measured against a known starting point, not estimated, not modeled. And the 15 minutes? Water crossing that same stretch now takes roughly an hour, 4 times slower, on the exact water they'd already clocked. Dr. Alan Puddock, the University of Exeter researcher who ran the monitoring, put it plainly. The results at Woodland Valley Farm helped demonstrate that beavers could play a genuine role in flood management, with peak flows cut by up to a third once the animals were established. That's 2 rivers now, 2 separate research teams, and the same result twice. If you want to see where the evidence goes next, because it's not finished yet, subscribe before the ending, because it doesn't land where you'd expect. Here's where it stops being 2 isolated success stories and becomes something bigger. A separate study pulled together monitoring data from Cornwall alongside comparable sites in Devon, the Forest of Dean, and Yorkshire, and found the same pattern repeating across different rivers and different landscapes. Statistically significant reductions in peak flow at every site. And at the most established sites, the effect didn't fade during the biggest storms, the ones that actually caused damage. It got stronger. Flood flow attenuation was measured persisting through the largest storms recorded at those sites, with reductions of up to 60% during the wettest conditions. That is the opposite of what 400 years of land management assumed would happen. The old belief was that a beaver dam becomes useless or dangerous exactly when a real flood tests it. The measured data says the harder it rains, the more the dams do. But floods were never the only objection raised against this animal, and this one carries real weight behind it, not just tradition. Freshwater angling in England and Wales supports an estimated 1 billion pounds of household income, the equivalent of 37,000 jobs. So when anglers and fisheries scientists raise a specific, technical concern that a dam is an obstruction, and an obstruction on a spawning river can cut fish off from the exact gravel beds they need to reach at the exact time of year they need to reach them, that isn't a small complaint. It's an industry-sized one. Rather than treat it as a side note, researchers from the University of Southampton ran a dedicated study to test it directly, tagging brown trout with microchips and tracking their movement past 4 beaver dams on a Scottish stream during the October to December spawning season, comparing them against fish in a neighboring unmodified stream. The honest answer they came back with is more complicated than either side of the argument wanted. When river flows were high, typically after rainfall, trout passed the dams successfully and larger fish did better than small ones. When flows were low, the dams became a genuine obstacle, delaying migration and, in some cases, stopping it. As the study's lead researcher put it, the findings show how adaptable brown trout are under favorable conditions, and how much that adaptability depends on the water they're given to work with. That's not the clean win the river otter and Cornwall numbers deliver. It's a real constraint, verified by the same kind of rigorous, tagged, before and after science that settled the flood question. And it means the fish passage debate isn't closed, it's narrowed. Under the right conditions, this animal and this industry coexist. Under the wrong ones, they don't yet, which brings the story to the place it hasn't fully arrived at. While Cornwall and Devon were proving beavers could tame floods, and Southampton was proving the fish passage question needed real nuance instead of a verdict, a larger version of the same tension was already building 300 miles north, on the River Tay in Scotland. Beavers there have expanded from roughly 146 individuals in 2012 to an estimated 954 by 2021, growing almost unchecked in a landscape mapped to have a 72% overlap with Atlantic salmon habitat. In the same window, wild salmon returning to Scottish rivers kept declining so sharply that the IUCN reclassified the entire British population from a species of least concern to one now formally listed as endangered. Nobody has proven the beavers caused that decline. The overlap alone doesn't establish blame, and the trout research suggests the relationship is conditional, not fixed. but it means the exact animal that just settled a 400-year argument about floods is now sitting in the middle of an unsettled one about salmon on a river where both species are, for the first time in centuries, trying to use the same water at the same time. An animal Britain spent 400 years eradicating produced, in one unauthorized decade and one deliberately measured 5-year experiment, enough hard evidence to overturn a policy older than the Industrial Revolution. What it hasn't done yet is prove it can hold that ground everywhere, on every river, without opening a new argument somewhere else. If you want to be there when that argument gets settled the same way this one did, with data instead of opinion, subscribe now. I'm already tracking what happens on the Tay, and it's the harder question of the two.